There is an invisible force silently destroying the potential of millions of people every day. It does not shout, does not threaten, and does not need physical violence to cause harm. It whispers. It whispers things like, "You are not capable. You will fail again. There's no point in trying." This negative internal dialogue, often disguised as humility or realism, is actually a devastating weapon against one's own achievement. And the most alarming part, this weapon is being fired from the inside out. Albert Bandura, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, spent decades studying human behavior and came to a conclusion as disturbing as it is liberating. It is not the lack of ability that prevents people from achieving their goals, but rather the belief that they are not capable. This belief, which he called low self-efficacy, acts as a psychological poison that paralyzes, weakens, and ultimately sabotages any attempt at progress. What Bandura revealed changes everything that was thought about failure and success. He demonstrated that constant self-criticism, that voice that insists on pointing out our flaws and reminding us of our mistakes, is not a simple manifestation of low self-esteem. It is responsible for a phenomenon he called negative self-fulfilling prophecy. The logic is simple and brutal. You believe you will fail, so you give up too soon or don't even try. And when you don't try, you confirm what you believed. And so day after day, this internal narrative condemns your potential without it even being tested. Most people don't even realize they are trapped in this cycle. They think they are being rational, modest, or realistic. But in practice, they are living under the command of a distorted identity, shaped by poorly processed past experiences, internalized criticism, and unrecognized fears. And as long as this voice remains the main narrator of your story, the ending will always be the same: paralysis, frustration, and self-sabotage. What makes this discovery even more alarming is that Bandura proved that this internal dialogue affects not only motivation or behavior, it affects the body itself. Studies with athletes, students, and professionals have shown that self-deprecating thoughts alter people's physical and cognitive performance. Anxiety, muscle tension, mental confusion, all of this can be triggered by just an internal phrase like, "I can't do this." The body literally starts to fail in response to a lie told by the mind. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of this discovery is this: that voice is not yours. It seems to be. It sounds like you. But it was built, programmed, often since childhood. It comes from criticism, comparisons, misinterpreted failures, and negative role models. And what Bandura showed us is that it is possible to rewrite this programming. It is possible to regain confidence, restore self-efficacy, and free the potential that has been buried by a cruel and misleading narrative. If you have ever felt stuck, small, or incapable without fully understanding why, this video is for you. Because perhaps what is killing your potential is not the world outside, but a story you learn to tell about yourself. And that, from now on, you can start to rewrite. For decades, Albert Bandura dedicated himself to understanding what truly differentiates people who achieve great feats from those who live below their potential. His conclusion broke with a deeply rooted belief in traditional psychology, that human performance is essentially determined by ability. For Bandura, ability matters, yes, but the belief in that ability matters much more. This belief was given a powerful name: self-efficacy. It is not synonymous with self-esteem or vague optimism. Self-efficacy is the firm conviction that you are capable of organizing and executing the actions necessary to achieve a specific outcome. It is an internal perception that acts as the engine of action. When someone believes they can, they persist. When they doubt their own ability, they retreat, even if they have all the tools to succeed. The most fascinating and concerning aspect is that this belief acts as a filter of reality. Two people with similar abilities may face the same challenge. One will fail by giving up too soon, while the other will succeed by continuing to try despite the obstacles. What differentiates them? It is not talent. It is how they interpret themselves in the face of difficulty. Bandura discovered that low self-efficacy not only limits a person's behavior, it literally programs failure. Individuals with negative beliefs about themselves tend to avoid challenges because they believe they will not be able to overcome them. When they try, they easily give up at the slightest sign of difficulty. And when they achieve some success, they quickly attribute it to luck or external circumstances, never to their own merit. Failure, on the other hand, is always internalized as evidence of their own incapacity. This psychological mechanism creates a mental environment where the individual's real potential is never truly explored. The mind has already decided that it is not worth trying, that it will not work, that the outcome is already sealed. And tragically, it is. But not by objective reality, and rather by the subjective perception of incapacity. The prophecy is fulfilled not because fate wanted it that way, but because the psyche ensured that the outcome was exactly as expected: defeat. Bandura also showed that self-efficacy is a self-reinforcing process. The more you believe you can, the more you act. The more you act, the more successful experiences you accumulate. And the more success you experience, the more you reinforce your belief that you are capable. The opposite is also true. Inaction feeds doubt, which feeds inertia, which validates the feeling of incapacity. It is a cycle that can lead to flourishing or stagnation, all depending on the type of narrative you allow to dominate your mind. This is why Bandura's discovery was revolutionary. He shifted the focus from what you have to what you believe about what you have. Failure ceased to be explained solely by external factors and began to be understood as a direct consequence of the internal architecture of personal beliefs. But Bandura did not stop there. He went beyond theory and began to investigate the physiological effects of self-efficacy. What he discovered is even more alarming, and it is exactly what we will see in the next part: how the mind directly influences the body, and how the simple act of saying "I can't" already initiates within you an invisible collapse of performance, health, and mental clarity. Prepare to understand how your biology is being shaped by your beliefs. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. One of Albert Bandura's most unsettling discoveries was how negative internal dialogue transforms into a perfectly structured system of self-sabotage, a self-fulfilling prophecy that condemns the individual to failure even before they have a chance to begin. The most disturbing aspect is that this cycle does not depend on objective reality, but rather on the story the person tells themselves every day in silence. It all starts with a simple, seemingly harmless phrase: "I am not good enough." This thought, when repeated frequently, transforms into belief. And this belief seeps into every aspect of behavior. Bandura identified 4 central patterns that emerge from this defeatist mentality, and all of them function as automatic mechanisms of failure. The first is the avoidance of challenges. When someone believes they will not be able to handle a certain situation, the natural response is to avoid any confrontation with it. This may seem harmless, but it is at this point that potential begins to die. The fear of failure prevents the person from putting themselves in positions where they could grow, develop new skills, or gain recognition. They hide, withdraw, and convince themselves that they are just being realistic. The second pattern is early quitting in the face of difficulty. Even if the person tries, the slightest resistance is enough to confirm their belief in incompetence. A mistake, a criticism, or an obstacle becomes absolute evidence that they should not have been trying in the first place. Instead of interpreting the mistake as a natural part of the learning process, they see it as a definitive sign of incapacity. And so, they abandon the journey before any real progress can happen. The third behavior is the external attribution of success and internal attribution of failure. When people with low self-efficacy achieve some positive outcome, they quickly devalue the achievement. They say it was luck, circumstance, help from others. The credit is never theirs. But when they fail, they take all the blame. This creates an unbalanced perception where the person never feels ownership of their victories, but always feels responsible for their falls. The fourth and most insidious pattern is the obsessive focus on one's own deficiencies. Instead of recognizing their strengths or areas for improvement, the individual fixates on everything they believe is wrong with themselves. The constant attention to what is lacking, what doesn't work, what could be better, but never is, generates a state of chronic psychological helplessness. The person stops investing energy in learning or growing because they believe none of it will make a difference. These four behaviors form what Bandura called the self-sabotage cycle of low self-efficacy. And this cycle is continuously fed by negative internal dialogue. Thought generates belief, belief generates behavior, and behavior confirms thought. A closed, hermetic system almost impossible to break, unless the person becomes aware of it. But the impact of this cycle does not stop in the mind. It advances silently to the body. Bandura discovered that this negative internal dialogue has a direct effect on the individual's physiology, altering the way they respond biologically to challenges and pressures. And this is what we will see in the next part. How thoughts like, "I can't," not only reduce your motivation, but literally sabotage your brain, your muscles, your breathing, and your performance, even if you have all the necessary capabilities to succeed. Most people believe that thoughts exist only on the mental plane, like abstract ideas floating in consciousness. But Albert Bandura showed that this view is dangerously naive. What you think, especially about yourself, directly affects the functioning of your body. Thoughts like, "I can't," "This is too much for me," or "I'm going to fail," do not stay trapped in the mind. They descend to the nerves, to the muscles, to the cardiovascular system. They shape your physiology. And when this happens, failure ceases to be just a belief. It becomes a biological state. Bandura and other researchers demonstrated that negative self-talk activates automatic responses of stress, anxiety, and physiological self-protection. When you tell yourself that you are incapable, your body interprets that statement as a threat signal. The sympathetic nervous system is activated, leading to increased heart rate, shallow breathing, muscle tension, and cortisol release. In other words, your body goes into survival mode, as if preparing to face a real danger. But this danger is not a lion in the jungle or a life or death situation. It's a work presentation, a new challenge, a creative project, an emotional confrontation. And instead of accessing your best cognitive resources, focus, memory, creativity, flexibility, you experience a drastic drop in performance just when you need to be present and functional the most. Your brain, in a state of alert, prioritizes self-protection, not high-level reasoning. This is especially evident in evaluation, performance, or competition situations. Bandura studied athletes who had identical technical skills, but showed radically different results depending on the quality of their internal dialogue. Those who cultivated self-deprecating thoughts, even with all the physical preparation, saw their performance plummet in decisive moments. They trembled, forgot movements trained for years, lost reflexes, and made simple mistakes. All because the body was obeying the mind. Not the rational mind, but the anxious and insecure mind. In educational contexts, this same phenomenon occurs. Students who internalize the belief that they are bad at math or weak at public speaking demonstrate physical symptoms of blockage, excessive sweating, rapid heartbeat, blank mind, trembling hands. The fear of failure becomes so intense that the body literally collapses to fulfill the mind's expectation. The prophecy comes true, not because it was true, but because the organism was trained to obey it. This is the cruelest aspect of negative self-talk. It not only distorts reality, it creates it. It conditions the body to perform poorly to validate the belief of incapacity. And over time, this dynamic becomes so automated that the individual does not even realize how much they are biologically sabotaging themselves. They just feel that they can't, without understanding that the true villain is within, and that it was they who taught their body to fail. But if the mind has enough power to sabotage the body, can it also train it for success? Bandura believed so. In fact, he went beyond merely diagnosing the problem. He developed practical, scientifically based methods to reverse this cycle. Techniques to restructure internal dialogue, rebuild self-efficacy, and unleash dormant potential. And that is exactly what we will see in the next part. Bandura's methods for reprogramming the mind and transforming the inner critic into an ally. Because if the body obeys the mind, everything starts with the story you choose to tell yourself. So far, we have seen how negative internal dialogue can trap an individual in a cycle of failure, sabotaging their mind, behavior, and even their body. But Albert Bandura was not just a theorist of despair, he was a builder of solutions. One of the most revolutionary contributions of his work was to show that self-efficacy is not a fixed trait. It can be built, strengthened, and restored, even in people who have spent their entire lives believing they are incapable. The first step, according to Bandura, is to break the overarching narrative. Thoughts like, "I am incompetent, nothing I do works out," or "I am not cut out for this," are dangerously vague, generic, and inflexible. This imprecision is what gives strength to self-criticism. The mind needs coherent stories, and these generalizations provide quick explanations for failure, even if they are false. Therefore, Bandura proposed replacing these absolute labels with specific, process-oriented, and actionable assessments. Instead of thinking, "I am bad at this," the focus should be redirected to, "I haven't learned this skill yet, but I can improve by practicing X, Y, and Z." This simple change in language, from judgment to progression, completely transforms how the brain interprets challenges. The word "yet" is one of the most powerful words in modern psychology. It reintroduces time, learning, and movement. It breaks fatalism and reactivates the possibility of growth. Another central strategy developed by Bandura is vicarious modeling, observing people similar to you succeeding in activities you find challenging. When the brain witnesses someone ordinary, not a genius, not a prodigy, but a real person, overcoming obstacles and achieving positive results, it begins to consider that this is also possible for you. This reduces the perceived distance between your current position and your goal. The mind stops thinking, "This is impossible for me," and starts saying, "Maybe I can do it too." Bandura also emphasized the importance of recognizing and celebrating small victories. The brain is driven by feedback, and when a person only acknowledges failures and ignores progress, they continuously reinforce the narrative of incapacity. Every small achievement, a task completed, a difficult conversation faced, a fear overcome, should be consciously validated as evidence of growth. These small accomplishments are like bricks in the reconstruction of self-efficacy. Ignoring them is the same as destroying the bridge before crossing it. Another crucial point is emotional reinterpretation. Bandura showed that many of the physiological signs we interpret as failure, such as butterflies in the stomach, sweaty palms, rapid heartbeat, are in fact signs of activation. The body is not saying you will fail, it is preparing for action. But what differentiates a high-performing athlete from someone who freezes is the interpretation of that activation. The former says, "This is excitement, I'm ready." The latter says, "This is panic, I'm going to fail." Changing the emotional reading of the body is about re-educating the mind to respond with power, not with withdrawal. Finally, one of the most effective practices for strengthening self-efficacy is the conscious restructuring of internal dialogue. Replacing phrases like, "I'm not good at this," with, "I am in the process of learning," may seem simplistic, but it is profoundly transformative. The brain operates on repetition, and the more it hears an empowering narrative, the more it becomes the new standard. The critical inner voice is not eliminated. It is confronted, trained, and over time transformed into a voice of guidance rather than punishment. These strategies are not magical. They require intention, repetition, and patience. But Bandura showed, with robust empirical evidence, that the mind is reprogrammable. And when self-efficacy begins to be restored, behavior changes, the body responds better, and potential starts to emerge from the ashes of doubt. But this leads us to an even deeper question. If your potential was merely silenced, and not dead, what else could you achieve if you learned to silence that voice that lies to you? This is what we will explore in the next part. The true power that lies dormant within you, waiting for the right narrative to set it free. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. There is a type of silent pain that few people can identify, but which is present in almost all unfulfilled lives. The mourning for a potential that was never explored. This is not the mourning for the loss of something that was had, but for the loss of something that could have been. A version of oneself that was silenced before it even had a chance to be born. And what Bandura revealed in his research is that this silencing does not happen due to a lack of talent, nor due to an absence of opportunity. It happens because of a deeply rooted idea. It's not worth trying because I will fail. This belief is not just limiting, it is paralyzing. It creates an invisible detour in a person's destiny. Every choice made based on doubt is a fork in the road that takes the individual away from their original path. The unchosen college, the abandoned career, the relationship never started, the cancelled trip, the book never written, the idea shelved. Thousands of possibilities aborted by a single voice saying, "This is not for you." Bandura argued that self-efficacy not only determines what you do, but what you don't even consider doing. It operates before the decision, in the realm of imagination. If you can't see yourself doing something, you won't even try. And this is how dreams die without a fight. Not because they were crushed by the world, but because they were rejected by the mind. The cruelest part is that this potential, despite being ignored, does not disappear. It remains there, latent, demanding attention in the form of chronic frustration, nameless anguish, and a constant feeling of living half a life. These are people who, even with functional lives, carry the sense that something essential is missing, not from the outside, but from within. The truth, as Bandura proved, is that human potential is vast, adaptable, and expandable. But it needs internal permission to emerge. It needs psychological space. And as long as the mind is too occupied with narratives of failure, judgment, and fear, there will be no room for true capability to manifest. Perhaps you have never discovered what you are truly capable of because you learned to doubt yourself before even testing yourself. Perhaps you were conditioned to accept little, to think small, to seek security instead of growth. Perhaps you have confused conformity with maturity and complacency with wisdom. But what if all of this were just a reflection of a misguided mental programming? What if your true greatness was merely silenced, waiting for a new narrative to break free? The great turning point proposed by Bandura is this: your potential is not dead. It is hidden beneath layers of self-criticism, fear, and misinterpreted experiences. And the key to accessing it is not in the external world, but in how you choose to see yourself from now on. But for this transformation to actually happen, a decisive step must be taken, perhaps the hardest of all, questioning the authority of your own inner voice. Because the most important question is not, what am I capable of? But rather, who is this voice that insists on saying that I am not? And it is exactly this final deconstruction that we will undertake in the next part. Because understanding the mechanism of self-sabotage is not enough. It is necessary to unmask the identity of this critical voice and rewrite who is in charge of your life. The voice you hear inside your head every day, the one that criticizes, judges, belittles, and paralyzes, is not you. It sounds like you. It uses your words, knows your fears, speaks with your intonation. But it has been shaped by factors that are often beyond your control. Traumatic experiences, poorly processed failures, toxic comparisons, childhood criticisms, family patterns, educational systems that punish mistakes instead of valuing effort. This internal voice that says, "You can't," has been constructed. And like any mental construction, it can be deconstructed. Albert Bandura shows us that self-efficacy arises from directly confronting this voice. It only begins to grow when you stop passively accepting everything your mind says about who you are. Because deep down, you've already realized this voice is not rational, it is automatic. It manifests at the same moments. Before you try something new, right after a mistake, when you are about to expose yourself, or when you start to succeed and feel that you don't deserve it. It does not analyze reality. It protects a limited identity, an identity based on fear. And here's the harshest truth. As long as this voice continues to command your decisions, you will be living the life it has chosen for you. Not the life you could have, not the one you desire, but the one it considers safe, realistic, acceptable. This voice not only traps your dreams, it traps your identity. It makes you believe you are weak, limited, broken. But you are none of that. You are someone who has believed these ideas for too long. The process of liberation begins when you question this internal authority. When you look at a thought like, "I am not capable," and respond, "Based on what?" When you hear, "It won't work," and ask, "Is that a fact or fear in disguise?" Every time you challenge this narrative, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And little by little, this voice loses its power. Not because it disappears, it will probably always be there, but because you stop obeying it. The goal is not to silence this voice forever. The goal is to make it no longer the judge of your life, but merely a distant, irrelevant echo that no longer dictates your path. When that happens, something extraordinary begins to emerge. You, the true you, the one who was not shaped by fear, but by possibility, by the courage to try, to fail, to grow, by the awareness that your story is still being written, and that you can, indeed, take the pen. The only thing that separates who you are today from who you can become is the story you accept as true about yourself. And if that story has been small, limited, and suffocating, perhaps it's time to write a new one. One where your self-efficacy is not a reflection of the past, but the tool with which you build the future. If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, "I am not my critical voice." This simple act can be the first step to breaking the cycle and taking control of your narrative. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, we dig deep to find the truths that set you free.